Okay, so continuing, he made a very interesting statement here that the common ground between suppression and repression is that in both cases the collective has to pay for the false virtue of the individual.
Okay, in both cases the collective has to pay for the false virtue of the individual. So can you describe some examples of how that works?
Well, the way he describes it is that the suppressors are the ones who become the moral dictators of the new voice. Okay, so people suffer. Said that creates a greater suffering because it's leveraged. It's coming down from an elite.
So you mean like the priests who were
like Torquemada in the Spanish Inquisition,
right? Okay, or the Catholic priests that were taking on the little boys.
Whereas with repression, you have the mass. So the mass is now being controlled, and it's uncontrollable. An example of that would be Nazi Germany, where the collective mass just has this momentum of its own. It's being controlled by the elite, but it's a false virtue.
It's false virtue, and so it's trying to repress everyone else.
Well, it's just repressed.
Well, that was a mass psychosis, though, wasn't it?
Yes, but that's the product of this repression, because those people aren't really aware of the negative projection they're making on
Jews,
whoever the enemy is.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's just a false virtue.
Right. It's just like the way we treat Muslims today.
They feel good about it.
Yeah, people feel good that they're so negative about.
They feel good about hurting people who support Muslims that aren't even Muslim.
Pardon?
There's people that feel virtuous in going. They threaten, for example, women for supporting this senator.
Oh, for supporting Al Franken.
Just for any of it. And
right.
Even if
the
senator from New York.
Yeah, Gillibrand.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was against Roy Moore, right? And she was also against Al Franken, both of them.
But I mean, there's women who get death threats from people who think because their virtue is that let's say it's Trump, his values are correct and yours are wrong, and we're going to kill you if you don't knock it off.
Right.
See, that's the Piscean age. That's what goes on in that book.
Well,
which book?
That book. They talk
this
about
book.
The Piscean age, where we're going from, where everything has been, just what you're talking about. It's split, like the two fish.
We're talking about this book.
He talks about it, and Heller talks about it, and Liz Green talks about it. So
yeah,
but I believe that the objectification, making an object of the enemy, the designated enemy, the objectification is a product of that split, because that's black and white thinking.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's why in Vietnam era they were talking about Vietnamese as gooks and Japs as nips, and during World War II, and Germans as what do we call it? Krauts. Yeah, Krauts in World War I and World War II, and
so it's the repressed content of the shadow in each person that is making that split, that objectification possible.
Right. Okay.
So that's what he means by false virtue, I think.
Right. Okay.
So guilt feeling is discharged by projecting the shadow, the alien out there, instead of being dealt with as one's own inner problem.
Okay. So
conscious mind is able to deal with physical nature and master it, but not man's psychic nature.
Man's what nature?
Psychic nature.
Okay, so humans weren't trying to get to the base of psychic nature.
Right. We had mastered, mankind had mastered material nature, but not the psychological aspect.
Right.
And he talks about the collective outbreak of evil in the 20th century, the 2 world wars, the bloodletting of the 2 world wars. So the theme of the book is how man has tried to manage evil based on the old ethic.
So reprint. Yeah. So
It's coming out somewhere. You can't.
yeah. So
He distinctly talks about guilt being a product of suppression, not repression.
guilt is result of suppression.
Because
Okay.
you know, the person knows
All right, but
that there's
but they're sort of combined, right? Because I guess by your definition of repression, you're brought up in the Catholic Church, and you're taught that certain things are sins or mortal sins or whatever it is, right? And so you don't know that you're being repressed. You don't know that your shadow is being repressed, is what you're saying. That you're just being brought up and you're just a good Catholic, right? Okay, and the suppression comes in the confessional when you admit to the priest that you did bad things, and then boom, he lands on
yes,
you.
very good. That's a good way to explain it.
150 Hail Marys and
No, you'd have to kill a whole family or something to get that many help.
really?
We're pretty light on this.
So how many Hail Marys do you get?
Maybe 1 or 2. Well, I was a kid when I was going to confession, so.
10 was really a lot.
10 was a lot?
Yeah, that was a lot.
10 Hail Marys and what? That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like beating up your brother or something.
It was bad enough
Okay.
that you had to say
So-
it out loud to another human being.
Yeah, well that's pretty painful. I mean that's a penalty. But okay, so a teenage boy admits to the priest that he's masturbating, right? And so he's feeling pretty guilty about that, right? And huh? Wait, never mind. I still masturbate. So
Do you still feel guilty?
I think it's
no.
I think it's more unconscious than that, Skip. The way that Neumann was talking about distinguishing between these two, and it's more of when the leader comes along and says, "Here's this bad group. We should all hate them." Then that
That
shadow
allows
becomes
it,
projected, and there's no feeling of guilt or anything. It's just an accusation.
right?
It's condemnation.
Right. It's the it becomes the scapegoat.
But what interests me was where does the guilt come from? 'Cause you
Well,
say
he
you're
talked. I
projecting
haven't
guilt.
got to that yet.
Okay.
But that's in here.
I mean, I got my ideas, but I'm just.
Okay. So there's a quote here I have. The old ethic must be held responsible not only for the denial of the shadow side, but also for the creation of the resultant split, which we've talked about, the healing of which is now of crucial importance for the future of humanity.
I mean, at
Well,
least
there were a whole classifications of sins, but the idea was that you could focus on what Neumann calls the anti-value, which is the value that is against the collective value. And you can suppress that, but in order to suppress it, you have to feel guilt, and you have to feel suffering, and you have to basically be miserable
and you have
in order
to
to
feel
expiate
fear.
that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're constantly living in this life of asceticism where you're denying yourself everything, but you're also feeling the suffering of it. So there's no way out. It's like being in a box. And the other form is repression, and for his dreams.
Well, the
Should I
saint.
repeat that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it is typified by the text from St. Augustine, in which the saint thanks God that he is not responsible to him for his dreams.
It's unconscious, right? You can't help it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The saint. Well, that seems right. I mean, but of course, of course, Dr. Jung says, well, the dreams are actually communications from God to you.
You fell into the trap, didn't you, Skip?
You were planning that.
You're in the old ethic.
Okay, so tell us about the new ethic. So here's the new ethic.
Yeah, I'm going to finish this quote first. The old ethic demands suppression and sacrifice, and in principle also admits of repression. Kaepernick people. That is to say, it does not consider the condition of the psyche or the total personality, but contents itself with the ethical attitude of the conscious mind, a partial system within the personality. In terms of the collective, this encourages an illusory form of ethics, oriented solely towards the action of the ego and the conscious mind. This is, in fact, a dangerous illusion. In the social life of the group and the collective, it leads to negative compensatory phenomena in which the repressed and suppressed shadow side breaks through.
Right.
Within the life of the community, this takes the shape of the psychology of the scapegoat. He talks about, on page 39, he talks about the role of the revolutionary. They're the founders of new religious or ethical movements, and they choose their inner voice over the values of the collective. And he actually calls them criminals.
He calls them criminals because...
Inadequate as a solution to modern man's most pressing moral problem. It also,
Sorry, say that one again.
the old ethic has not only proved inadequate as a solution to modern man's most pressing moral problem, it also confronts him with an additional hazard due to the splitting tendency brought about by its dualistic conception of the world and of values. That's a summation of the old ethic.
So the new ethic. Dun, da, da, da.
Okay, so it requires a reorientation to the moral problem. Shadow in the persona, and the shadow is the repressed content in the psyche, and the persona is the mask. It's very simple, brought about by the means of the assimilation of the shadow. It's very easy to say, but not that easy to do.
Very difficult to do because who has an axe to grind about assimilating the shadow? Every religious person in the world. I mean, every priest, pastor, rabbi, they all don't want you to assimilate the shadow because then you're not going to pay.
Well, there is some assimilation in the confession.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
So,
Pardon?
You're cleansed until you leave the booth and get in the parking lot and curse on your own.
Yeah, but are you assimilating or are you only paying the price? Okay. You masturbated, you pay the price of 10 Hail Marys, and have you assimilated the issue and you won't?
It's a fresh slate. You're starting with a fresh slate. So
Right, but then
you're but you're still going to have your sin nature. So you're caught in that cycle. You can't help yourself.
Right. I mean,
go to confession. Never have anything to
your prostate is going to keep producing semen, right? So.
Well, mine won't.
Let's get back to the priest.
No, I'm.
Well, right. That's the thing. You're caught in the cycle. So it's not
Because you're
assimilated
not
permanently. It's only in the.
I think what you're saying is that talking to the priest doesn't assimilate the shadow.
I mean, it assuages the guilt for this week. If you talk to the priest, right?
It didn't do anything.
Well, let's be more constructive about it, though. It is a self-reflection, even
Right.
though it's
Look, I agree with that.
though it's superficial.
And Dr. Jung did write an article called "Psychoanalysis or the Confessional." Right. Okay, because he saw, and years ago I saw the parallels between the confessional and psychoanalysis, because a lot of what makes people crazy, I mean, not crazy, not psychopathically crazy, but neurotically crazy, is that you just haven't talked to somebody about the things that you think are bad. And, if anybody, I remember Bill saying, well, he's just a guy, No,
It was a guy.
no, Bill just said it generically, but the point is that, it's a guy thing. It's, the reality is we produce semen throughout our lives, and it has to go somewhere.
Our hardware.
Right.
Oh, no pun intended.
And it has to go somewhere, and a lot of times your wife isn't there to take care of it, so what are you going to do? And that's your nature, and so you can feel guilty about it. The church can make you feel guilt about it, fear of
Well, the thing is,
damnation, but it's not going to stop it from being produced.
you can be perfectly comfortable with it and meet a new partner, and if they're not comfortable with it, then you got to go work through the whole process again.
Say it again.
Well, let's say you've worked out the process. You don't have any guilt feelings about whatever it is you do, and and this other partner, you talk to them about it, and they're fine with it. They go, "It's fine. You're a guy. You're just a guy. That's just what guys do." Then you meet someone new because maybe this one
Didn't work, yeah.
whatever. And she's like, "Oh," and she wants you to go see a priest. And then you got to work through the whole thing again. So. Or you'll dump her.
God help us.
Coming up against her.
Sorry, I've had multiple wives.
Oh, so glasses all the time.
Yeah, Bill, you're a piker. I have a friend who's had, believe it or not, I have a friend who's had 5 wives.
Oh my.
One of them twice. Okay,
Well, I've learned my lesson. There will not be 5.
so he's been
Last word.
married 5 times, but to 4 women.
Interesting.
Like a man was Taylor.
Yeah, but he,
There's no point at my age of getting married. You're better off being single if you have to change the tax laws.
Yeah, well, the whole legal system is not encouraging for men to get married.
I'd rather just cohabitation's a great thing.
I don't know. Do we have common law marriage in Maryland?
Well, you just got to go right up to that time limit and say, "See ya."
Here you go.
Let's move to another state.
God help us.
John's like, we are so off track.
I know.
You with the
All
new
right.
ethic did?
Okay,
All right, so give us a new ethic.
Okay, so
Help us, John.
getting back. So anyway, this assimilation of the shadow supposedly transforms the persona. Now, I didn't quite understand that, but maybe you can help me with that. To me, it just means that your outer personality more matches your wholeness inside after assimilating the shadow.
I don't know about that.
So what does it mean by transforms the persona?
I don't know, because the persona is something like, okay, you become a lawyer, so you behave like a lawyer, okay, or you become a judge.
The mask, yeah.
Or you become a judge, so you behave like a judge, or you become a priest, so you behave like a priest. But I don't know
so this
that's
transforms that mask into not so much of a mask, apparently. More of the authentic person inside.
Maybe it's not talking about like a professional persona. It's talking about a private persona, an intimate persona of some sort.
Maybe. I mean, because
Because I mean, I go to work.
I'm-
I put
I'm
on
not
a persona.
sure.
I go to church. I put on a persona,
right.
which is my biggest one.
That's definitely a
Singing out there in
persona.
the-
Ah, thank you.
I
Ah,
go to
thank
a
you.
restaurant. I
See,
put on a persona.
so this is what you didn't see last week. That's the original. That's skip with the original.
That's the door? On, that's hanging?
Yes.